You are listening to Stump the Pastor, the show where you, the listener, send us your Bible-related questions, and we attempt to answer them for you. I'm your host, Pastor Ellis Wedel, and today in the studio I have with me my friends, Adam Hrankowski.
Abednego!
Oh, yeah, and Shadrach and Meshach, too.
There's a story behind that,
Okay.
but I'll let you introduce the other fellow first.
And Matt Wedel's here with us, too.
Hey, that's me. Fun fact, it's actually spelled Abednego.
Right, Abednego. It's two words. Okay. Here's the story.
Sorry.
Quick story.
Okay.
Why this is a greeting. Many years ago, we had a friend. This was like about 30 years ago. We had a friend who was pregnant, and so of course we had to name the fetus because you name fetuses, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So we decided that we're going to name this fetus Abednego. Right?
Okay.
And if it was a girl, I guess we'd call it Abednego, but we didn't know. So we called it Abednego. So anyway, after the baby was born, right,
Yep.
I phoned a friend of mine to tell him, but he already knew. So he answers the phone, Abednego, to indicate that he already knew. And so, well, now we've got this word, and he used it as a greeting, and we thought we want to keep using this word. So we from then on, we've used it as a greeting. So I'm going to tell him to listen to this program and to make sure he's got his mouth full of tea at the very beginning because he'll spit it all out.
So the idea is that every week you give us a new greeting.
A new greeting.
In a new language.
In a new language.
And Abednego is the new one.
And Abednego's a new one,
Wow.
even if I have to make it up.
There you go. Well, awesome.
Alrighty.
So that's a great way to start off the show. And today we are going to be talking about a subject that for some really is an important subject.
Sure.
And for others, not so much. You're either it seems like one of those things where you either really care about it, or you really don't care about it. There's not a whole lot of in between in this question I've found with people that I've asked. But the question for today is: do animals go to heaven when they die? Now, understand when I use that word heaven. We've talked about this in the past. When I use that word heaven, I'm talking about wherever the afterlife is.
Right.
Okay. So wherever we're going after the afterlife, because personally, I don't believe we go to heaven, at least how we understand heaven. We're going to go to the new earth, I believe.
Okay.
And so
I'm with you on that.
But we use that word heaven to
Sure.
describe what's happening after we die.
The final reward.
Right. So are animals going to be there? Or not necessarily are animals going to be there, because I think animals are going to be there. But are they going to be the animals that we have here?
Gotcha.
Our pets.
Will Fido be there?
Right.
Or will it be just some generic dog?
One we don't know.
That's right.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why so many people, I think, believe that they are going to go is that Disney has done a wonderful job.
The gospel according to Disney.
Yes, Disney has done an awesome job of giving animal characters human characteristics.
Anthropomorphize them.
Yes, they make them so that we really can't tell the difference.
Right.
And in
crabs.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point where people, in many cases, would rather fight for animal rights than for human ones.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
So we would rather, complain about the fact that chickens are being slaughtered wrong or that there's a whale stuck in the harbor than we do about whether a kid gets aborted at the hospital.
Okay.
Many people would rather associate with animals than with people. And many others are making the conscious choice to have pets rather than children, and then treating them like their children after they get them, even referring to them as their babies.
Yep.
And making comments like, I love them, like I would a child. They're part of the family. This is being the case. The question of whether animals have an afterlife is significant for many because for them, they are as close as their children would be to them.
Fair enough.
I'd like to start by beginning to look at some Bible verses.
Sure.
That have to do with animals. And I don't have every verse in here because, as you know, we have a limited time space here. But I picked out, 8 or 9 verses here that talk about animals in the Bible. So let's just go through them, and maybe you could start with the first one, and then we'll alternate as we go down here.
Okay. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 18 to 21. And I think you're using the Net Bible here.
Mm-hmm.
I also thought to myself, it is for the sake of people, so God can clearly show them that they are like animals. For the fate of humans and the fate of animals are the same. As one dies, so dies the other. Both have the same breath. There is no advantage for humans over animals, for both are fleeting. Both go to the same place. Both come from the dust, and to dust both return. Who really knows if the human spirit ascends upward and the animal spirits descend into the earth?
So what do we say about that?
Well, that's Ecclesiastes is pretty depressing.
Ecclesiastes is. Well, for some people who don't know, do you want to share a little bit about Ecclesiastes, or why, where it came from, or why we would say that?
Ecclesiastes. Who wrote it? Was it Solomon?
Solomon
wrote Ecclesiastes, and Ecclesiastes. It's poetry. And I'm not good with poetry in English to begin with, right? Okay, so what you've got with Ecclesiastes is he's got a dialogue going back and forth. He's talking about the meaning of life. And it's pretty depressing. He goes, why do this when we have this? And why do this when we have this? What's the point of it all? Everything is vanity. Everything is fleeting, chasing after the wind. These are the terms that he uses.
Yep.
But finally, he comes to the conclusion of the matter at the very end that it's our duty to fear God and to keep his commandments. So I think if I were to sum up Ecclesiastes, it would be life is pointless unless we consider God.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and I would say this with regard to that is that's why it's so important that when we're looking for verses that would be able to give us some understanding about a particular topic or something, that we can't just go to a book like Ecclesiastes, pull a verse out and say, well, this is the way it is because this is what the Bible says. Because through that whole book, what Solomon isn't telling us that we need to follow everything that goes through that book. And God's not saying these are the words of wisdom from me.
He's musing.
Yeah, he's telling us, this is my experience, and then at the end, the important part is life with God is what is important.
Is what counts.
Right.
Yeah.
So with regard to this, when it says here that there's no advantage for humans over animals, both are fleeting, both go to the same place, both come from the dust, both to the dust they return. And by the way, that's what it's saying. Both go to the same place. It's talking about that both arrive here the same way, and when they both go back into the ground again. It's not saying both go to heaven necessarily, but this next verse says, this being the case, the question of whether who really knows if an animal spirit ascends upward and or a human spirit ascends upward and an animal spirit descends to the earth? Question mark. So what he's saying here is not that one does or one doesn't. He's saying I don't know.
Yeah.
One way or the other. Job 12:10 says this: in whose hand is the life of every creature and the breath, and that word breath is literally spirit, of all the human race. And it includes every creature, which would mean, does that include, is it when it says creature, does that just mean human, or does that mean everything that's living?
I think you have to look at the context. You have to look at the context, which I have to be honest here, you don't have a whole lot of context here. You don't have a whole because it says in the New Testament to proclaim the gospel to all flesh. Now we have a context.
Yeah.
The context of the whole New Testament is talking about people, right? It's not saying to go proclaim the gospel to the hamburger steaks in my freezer.
Right.
So I'm being facetious, but my point is you can take about an inch out and be very narrow in how you're looking at something, but you have to look at the context.
Right.
There's not a lot of context here.
I even in what we have here, though, it would seem to be that this would be speaking about the human race just because of what it says at the end there, right?
In whose life is every creature and breath of all the human race. Oh yeah.
So it seems like that human race would refer back to that creature there. But we got to look at. I mean, I'd have to look at the context too and see for sure. Mm-hmm. But that's what it seems at least.
Again, we're dealing with poetry
as
well, and so there may be. You'd want to back it up with something that was more clearly didactic. What do I mean by didactic? It's there to teach something.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Genesis chapter 9, verses 9 to 10. Look. No, I'm sorry. I can't read look when I read the Bible. Behold, I now confirm my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, including the birds, the domestic animals, and every living creature of the earth with you, and those that came out of the ark with you, every living creature of the earth. So the context here is Noah has just got off the ark with his family, and all the critters that have been on the ark. What a great adventure they've had with all the giraffes. It's always giraffes in the Noah's Ark. Always giraffes. And God is saying, I'm confirming my covenant with you. And who is he confirming with you? You and your descendants and all these creatures.
Every living creature.
All these creatures.
Yep.
They're part of the covenant.
And that covenant was what? Do you remember what the covenant was?
Covenant with, that he would never flood the earth again.
He never flood the earth
never flood the earth again.
And so, carrying on with that, just going down 6 more verses, it says in Genesis 9:16, when the rainbow is in the clouds, I will notice it and remember the perpetual covenant between God and all living creatures of all kinds that are on earth. I will not flood again.
Okay. Genesis chapter 6, 19 to 22. And you know what? I got to tell you, I don't think it's any mistake that you've chosen Old Testament verses. Because I think the Old Testament, the New Testament has more to say about the afterlife than the Old Testament, in my opinion.
It does, but it has very little to say about animals.
And it has very little to say about, what, the New Testament?
Yeah.
Okay.
There isn't a whole lot of verses on animals in the New Testament.
Interesting.
But all the same.
Genesis chapter 6, verses 19 to 22. You must bring into the ark 2 of every kind of living creature from all flesh, male and female, to keep them alive with you. Of the birds after their kinds, and of the cattle after their kinds, and of every creeping thing of the ground after its kind. 2 of every kind will come to you, so you can keep them alive. And you must take for yourself every kind of food that is eaten, and gather it together. It will be food for you and for them. And Noah did all that God commanded. He did indeed.
So, I mean, we see that God cared about the animals.
He cares about the animals.
Yeah, he saved them the same way he saved Noah and the family. So, so that might lead us to believe that he wants to, have some kind of longer period of time with them too.
The covenant is with everybody, with all flesh.
Yeah.
And all flesh clearly means not just, when I was talking about proclaiming the gospel, in this context, it means every living thing.
Right.
Okay.
Genesis 1:30, it says, and to all the animals of the earth, and to every bird of the air, to all the creatures that move on the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. It was so. So once again, God showing his care for the animals, taking care of them by providing food for them.
Mm-hmm. Except not the animals that are... Oh, no, that's Genesis 1:30, because later on he says, go ahead and eat animals.
Right.
Okay, Genesis 1:30. Okay. Hosea. We've gotten out of Genesis. Hosea 2:18. At that time I will make a covenant for them with the wild animals, the birds of the air, and the creatures that crawl on the ground. I will abolish the warrior's bow and sword, that is, every weapon of warfare, from the land, and I will allow them to live securely. So making it, again, cares for the animals.
Yep. Luke 12:6. This is the only one from the New Testament I have here because they're fairly scarce. So this is one that I thought actually talks more about the animal itself rather than, like, there are some verses. There's a verse that the lady who comes to Jesus and says, can you help me? And he says, well, you're a Samaritan. And she says, well, even
the
dogs, get the scraps.
That was
the
a Samaritan. That was the Syro-Phoenician woman.
Right.
I'm pointing northward.
Yes.
Up to Lebanon.
You're right.
Can't see that, folks.
So she says even the dogs get the scraps, right? But that doesn't really talk much about the animal. It mentions an animal, but it doesn't really talk about the animal.
And in fact, that may have been a reference to Gentiles.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah,
see?
it's just...
So it couldn't even be a literal dog.
That's
maybe.
right, literal dog. It might have been, yeah.
So Luke 12:6 says this, aren't 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies? Yet not one of them is forgotten before God.
So God likes birds.
God cares about the birds.
Okay.
He cares about everyone, no matter how small they are. And sparrows, you got to understand, of all the animals, I mean, we have sparrows flying everywhere, right? So of all the birds, if you were a bird watcher, right, sparrows would not be on very high on your list of birds that you want to go after to look at.
Right.
They're very plentiful. They're very common. They're not very beautiful. I mean, as far as birds go, there's a lot more beautiful birds than them.
Peacocks.
So what this is saying is that even the most lowly of the birds, God cares about.
Cool.
Anyway, animals in heaven. What is going to happen? Well, the Bible indicates that animals, at least depending on what your end times beliefs are, It indicates that animals will exist after his return at the beginning of the kingdom, according to Isaiah 11:6-9. It reads this: "A wolf will reside with a lamb, and a leopard will lie down with a young goat. An ox and a young lion will graze together, as a small child leads them along. A cow and a bear will graze together, their young will lie down together. A lion, like an ox, will eat straw. A baby will play over the hole of a snake, over the nest of a serpent an infant will put his hand. There will no longer injure or destroy in my entire royal mountain, for there will be a universal submission to the Lord's sovereignty, just as the waters completely cover the sea." Here the Bible is declaring that animals will still exist in the future, once again, depending on how your end times beliefs go, after Christ's reign begins. Because many people believe this refers to the millennium, right?
Right.
So so they would say that this would be saying at least that animals will be a part of that. Whether it will be in the new earth or not would be the question.
So if I can kind of take a trajectory of what we've got so far here, we've got we've got some verses from the Old Testament that suggest, well, people that don't suggest, they go and say that God cares for animals. Okay,
Right.
And then we've got some poetic verses which suggest that we seem to be made. Well, they talk about us being made out of the same stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a covenant being made with animals, and then we have this indication about in the new heavens and the new earth, the sort of the next act, a description of how wonderful it will be in terms of peace, and it's talking about animals. Talking about animals living in peace.
Yeah. Yep. And so as we go on, and we look in Revelation 19:11-14, it talks about when Jesus returns that he's going to come how?
On a
horse.
On a horse.
Right? So this is what it says. It says, "Then I saw heaven opened, and here came a white horse. The one riding it was called Faithful and True, and with justice he judges and goes to war." That's Jesus that they're speaking about.
Okay.
"His eyes are like a fiery flame, and there are many diadem crowns on his head. He has a name written that no one knows except himself. He is dressed in clothing dipped in blood, and he is called the Word of God."
Mm-hmm.
"The armies that are in heaven, dressed in white, clean, fine linen, were following him on horses." Now, we have to understand, first of all, about the book of Revelation, just as we talked about Ecclesiastes, that Revelation is a book that we refer to as apocalyptic.
And there's going to be these locusts with these huge teeth and all that. So
Tales of a scorpion.
Yeah, all that. So the images that you have is like somebody's dream.
Right. So this may refer to a literal horse, or it may refer to something else.
Right.
Whatever it is that God's or Jesus is going to come on, that maybe we don't know about even yet, but he's using a horse maybe to symbolize that for us, because we wouldn't understand what it is that is happening.
There's a picture that means something. It may not be there to pick apart and say, "Oh, look, there's going to be white horses."
Right.
Jesus will have one. Yeah.
So that might say that he's literally going to come on a horse, or it might mean that he's literally going to come on something that is kind of like a horse. A horse, can carry you a long distance, and it can carry you a long distance, whatever it is.
Something horseish. Yeah.
So where does this leave us? Well, I want to share a quote by Wayne Grudem, and Wayne Grudem is a well-known Christian theologian, and he has a book called just basically Systematic Theology. It's one of the most well-known systematic theology books that is in at least evangelical circles. And this is what he says with regard to animals. He says, "These differences between human beings and the rest of creation are not absolute differences, but often differences of very great degree.
Okay.
The more complex and highly developed animals are more like God than lower forms of animals. Therefore, we should not say that only man reflects any likeness to God at all, for in one way or another, all of creation reflects some likeness to God. But it is still important to recognize that only man, out of all of creation, is so like God that he can be said to be in the image of God.
Okay.
In some respect, the differences are absolute, and in other respects, they are relative, but they are significant." So he's trying to make, in saying that, he's trying to make a distinction between us as humans and animals.
Okay.
That, yes, we all reflect God in some manner, but because we are made in the image of God, we are a lot higher up the scale of God's image than an animal would be.
But it's interesting that he uses that term, differences in degree.
In degree, yeah.
Rather than focusing on differences in substance.
Yes.
Which is this is where a lot of this rests. Like when somebody says, no, animals don't go to heaven because animals don't have souls.
Right.
Right. What they're doing is they're saying there's a difference in substance, that you and I are substantially different. We may have bodies that are like animals, but we have this other thing, and that's the thing that goes to heaven. That's the theology. But I don't think it's entirely a biblical theology, because I believe in a physical resurrection, and I think the Bible teaches a physical resurrection, and well, animals are physical, so it doesn't. I don't think it answers the question to say animals don't have souls.
Yeah. Yeah, and so why don't we talk a little bit about that, because that's been the biggest argument with regard to this subject by those who would say that our animals don't go to heaven, and so not necessarily saying there won't be animals in the afterlife, but that the animals that we have here won't be the ones that will be there.
There's an ontological continuance.
Right.
Yeah. So well, let me tell you a story.
Okay.
Okay, if I could hear. Okay. So our cat died. Cats do that.
Yep.
Okay. Cats do that. Okay. So our cat died. My daughter was 4 at the time. I think she was 4. And so when she found out that the cat died, she cried. Right. Makes sense, right? And so she goes, well, I want to see the cat. I want to go see the cat. So, okay, well, the cat's downstairs, sleeping, but she's not going to wake up now. Okay, so she's in her little bed. So she goes downstairs and sees the cat. She starts crying, and she goes, so when's the cat going to be made alive again? What are you talking about? Well, because you taught me, now I'm translating, you taught me that when Jesus comes back, everybody's going to be made alive again.
Yep.
So how many days? How many? She's a 4-year-old, of course. How many days? Like, well, I don't know. And of course, the question is, will that cat be made alive again?
That is the question.
Will that cat be made alive again, or will
it be a different cat?
Will it be a different cat?
A new cat.
Yeah. And there was that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie where people clone their animals.
Yep.
And then they infuse them with the memories, because people want, no, I want my cat, not just cats.
Right. So your animal could die, and they would go into this store where they cloned an animal that looked exactly the same as the one you have.
Yep.
And they could transfer the memories of that dog over and allow you to be able to take that dog home to your kids, and they'd never know the difference because the dog.
That's right. This was an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
Yeah.
I don't remember the name of it.
I remember I remember it myself.
That's right. And he says, "I'll be back" in that one too, because it's a joke. Because anyway, rabbit trail. Okay, so yeah. So I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that that my cat, her name was Yorston. That's another story we won't get into. Do you think that cat will be in heaven?
Personally, I'm not sure that he will be.
Oh.
I think I'm a believer at this point, and I don't know. In the end, I don't know.
I don't know
but
either.
But personally, from what I see, I think that we are going to have animals wherever we're going.
Okay. I'm
not sure that they're going to be the animals we have here.
Fair enough.
And part of that has to do with what you talked about with regard to the spirit and soul.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, and let's get into this a little bit. As far as humans are concerned, some people believe we're trichotomous, which means we have a body and a soul and a spirit. Some believe we're dichotomous, which means we have a body and a soul / spirit. The soul and the spirit are the same thing. Okay, they're just different names for the same thing.
Yep.
So.
And then some people believe that we're just the nephesh, like when it says that we're all the same.
Right.
Nephesh is the word which is often translated soul. So Adam became a living soul.
Right.
And so that's all we are.
So when we die, the general belief within evangelical circles has been that when we die, our soul / spirit or spirit whatever goes to be with God, and then our bodies go into the grave, and then Jesus at the resurrection, our bodies raise, and then they are transformed, and our souls, our bodies come back together again, so that forevermore after that we will be human again, just in a transformed body, and that body and soul will be united forever.
Right.
So because the body, as I understand it, the body and soul are created to be together, and so it's not natural for them to be separated. So at some point they need to come back together again. It's not they don't feel good by themselves. They don't like to be on their own. They want to be together.
So can Yorston, the cat, be resurrected? So if Yorston doesn't have a soul, Yorston never had a soul to begin with in this theory.
Yeah.
Okay. So Yorston is resurrected. What's the difference between my cat that never had a soul before she died and my cat that's resurrected and goes, well, I wasn't in heaven, but now that there's been the resurrection, I've been resurrected, and all I know, like maybe all the animals, they follow what we call conditional immortality. These are the people that believe there's nothing until you're resurrected. Right? Maybe that applies to animals.
Sure. There's no reason for us not to believe that could be the possibility. That is a possibility.
There's not a lot of teaching.
No, there isn't. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I think it's because in the biblical culture, they didn't have the same concerns that we had. What they were concerned about was, will my progeny live? And even, will I see them again? And so the Bible addresses those things.
Yeah.
People didn't ask the question, but what about my beloved horse? They didn't ask that question.
Right. And so, so it's not something that would be answered within there.
Yeah.
Some people have made the argument against animals going to heaven because of the difference between the ability to reason of man and the ability of an animal to reason.
Okay.
And both have the same senses and both have awareness of their surroundings, but only humans can think rationally using logic. Humans can analyze data. Animals can only perceive. Animals can be conditioned, but humans can be taught ideas. Okay. And sometimes it gets confusing because people will say that they think their animal does reason. They think their animal doesn't. But the majority of I would say the majority, I'd say all of it, is really just how they've been conditioned and how they have been taught to do what they're doing. And why is this important? For some, it illustrates the difference between the merely physical phenomena of perception and the immateriality of reasoning. Sorry about that.
Okay.
No scientist has been able to discover any link between the physical matter of the brain and the immaterial thought. In fact, it would be impossible to do so because science can only study physical phenomena, so it can't study stuff that isn't physical.
Right. Okay.
If then humans are found to have an immaterial mind, then a part of them exists apart from the body that may be capable of surviving death.
And that's a very interesting discussion.
Right?
Yeah.
On the other hand, if an animal dies, there would be nothing left of it to survive.
Okay.
Once life has left the matter of an animal's body, it ceases to be a living thing altogether. Is what I would say. It was just merely a carcass. So that's one view. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying it's a view.
There's an argument.
So here's how I would say we should conclude this. First of all, what do you think? What's your final say on this?
My final thing is I don't honestly know, but you know what? I like the idea.
I like the idea too.
I like the idea, and I can't effectively argue against it.
Yeah.
But I do need to quote Bertrand Russell on the matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bertrand Russell, in a book that I read ages ago, so maybe I'm really slaughtering the quote. Okay, but he said regarding animals in heaven that a heaven for men, like people, and a hell for people, and a heaven for mosquitoes could be quite easily combined.
Yep.
Right? And this is my daughter asked this. She goes. She says, will there be mosquitoes in heaven? And we go, oh, yes, but they'll be beautiful and they'll talk. We make it up because we don't know.
Yep. Yep. Well, I have a quote, too.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a quote from C.S. Lewis.
Quote C.S. Lewis.
Now, C.S. Lewis, interestingly, he was a great cat lover.
Okay.
And this is interesting because he wrote a book, of course, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and all these Narnia series that all the animals are like, they're equivalent to people. Right, in the book.
Right.
But this is what he says, and I don't know how theological this is, but this is what he says. He says, he believed that domestic animals could somehow be saved in their masters.
Okay.
That if you're a believer, then your animals could be saved that way. Anyway, we're at the end of what we need to say, and I just want to close with this. It doesn't. In one way, it doesn't really matter whether your animal gets to heaven or whether it doesn't, because if you don't get there, because you won't see them anyway. So what I would suggest is make sure you're right with God, so that if your animal does make it there, you'll be able to have fun with it.
You don't want Fido to be there without you.
That's right. We want to thank you for joining with us today. Be sure to tune in next Sunday at 8:30 for Stump the Pastor. If you have a question about the Bible or Christianity, please send it into my email, which is pastorwedel, W-E-D-E-L, @outlook.com. If your question is chosen to go on the air, you'll receive a free gift, compliments of Heartland Baptist Church and CFIS-FM. Until next time, may God richly bless you, and so long.
Abednego.